So we've run up the Manx, and it sounds really lovely. Now this is something we're going to be doing now for customers. Potentially you've got a bike in your collection, you want to move it on, you want it presented like we've been doing today, like this, we're happy to do it. These sort of bikes especially are nice to do because how often do you get a chance to actually present a really nice Manx Norton? And this one is, as we mentioned just now, 1948. I've got the number on my hand, model 30M. But a lovely machine, and it has had race history briefly, and went into private collection. So now it's there for someone else to enjoy. But a lovely bike. But now we're going to move on from that to another Norton. Now what we got here is, we've had a few Nortons in the workshop, we know that. And the last one that was similar to this was a Dominator. But this is the next one on. This is the Atlas. The Atlas was a big brother really of the Dominator. Dominator was like 500, 600, 650. Then they brought out the Atlas 750. Lovely bike. It's in a slimline frame. But they did have a little bit of reputation, vibration. But a lovely bike. Now this one's come in. The reason it's here, it's had a story of running for a short period of time, then just stopping. Well, under investigation, it's actually been nipping up, seizing up. There's a few things that have been going on, and we're going to show you on the bench where things probably started from. So we'll come back on things on that in a moment. On the bench, the first thing we're going to look at the oil tank. Now, anti-drain valves. I do fit them. I wasn't sure at the time, but this one, I'm not going to say where it came from because I don't know. It's a very early version. Now, I'm just going to take it apart. This one has a really big ball. Now, if you look at the size of that ball and that spring here, it's quite a long spring. It's quite a strong spring. This looks okay, but we know that how this works, the pump has to suck the ball off the seat. This one is all built into the strainer. What I mean is a filter that goes in the tank. Okay, we've got some metal bits here still. This has all got to be cleaned out. What's happened here is possibly the pump wasn't very strong. What I mean is the gears weren't in a very good order, and it wasn't allowing this ball to be pulled off the seat. Now the seat is this part, takes back out, I'll show you. The seat's there like that. And when you suck, like sucking through a straw, that ball should come away from there. When the engine stops, the spring tension will push the ball back to the seat. Straightforward, but it's possible the spring's quite strong. And when that's wound down inside, there's quite a lot of tension on there. Quite easy that could be stretched. So what's happened is running that engine. As I said, always make sure you get your return. If you have a valve, a lot of people have got the modern valves now, which are good. Always take your cap off and have a look inside. You'll see your return of oil coming back. Don't just look at it just for a couple of seconds. Run the engine for, I don't know, half a minute. And just keep looking, make sure it's okay. Do that more regular than not, really. That applies to anything where you've got a pressure valve, one of these anti-drain valves, I should say, not a pressure valve. So what's been happening? Oil's been delivered to the oil pump, which is this fella inside the crankcase. I will take this apart when we get to this part of the engine, but it's possible that the pump is not as good as it should be. When the gears get worn, you can get cavitation. So it's not sucking properly. It's like it's like someone who can't breathe properly. It's not drawing properly. So if it's not drawing the ball off the seat, it won't get the oil circulation. That is one thing that's happened. So we've had an engine that's not had the correct amount of oil. So what does it do? Well, it starves the conrods because the oil goes through the crankshaft, and we come more closely to this. So we have a white metal build up here where it's been taken off. Okay, we've just spoken about the anti-wet sumping valve. We're going to talk about the head and work through the engine. Otherwise I'm going to miss it, how I should put it across to you people. Now, we've taken these two valves out, exhaust and inlet on the right hand side. I'm just going to show you, this one here is the exhaust valve. Now, this, we call this pocketing, really. It's where the rocker, if I lift that up, it's your tappet adjuster. This is your rocker arm, and this is your tappet adjuster. It's embedded itself into the base of the valve. So when you, if I put that valve back up inside, just take the springs off, I can show you more easily. Now when you look at this, we're opening and closing, the engine's running. It's hammering this valve stem here, and it's embedding itself. And it shouldn't do that. These are cheap valves. Not good to buy cheap replacement parts. It doesn't pay, and this is what can happen. And if you can imagine trying to maintain your valve clearances, trying to get your feeler gauge in there, you're not getting a true reading. The funny thing is both exhaust ones are bad, but the inlets aren't very bad. They're just marked. But we are, for the customer, replacing all 4 valves. So that's that. The head itself, like I say, the guides have all been replaced, and that's all good. It's going to have a good clean up. We'll reseat the valves, and that'll be all good. The next thing we're going to move to is, we mentioned about this oil starvation from the anti-wet sump ball here. But now we're going to talk about the barrel and the piston, what's been going on here. So we'll put that anti-drain valve to one side. Now, if you look at this barrel, I don't know if you can see, it looks okay from the top. We can see some score marks. If I get my finger up inside, if you look down in there, you see 2 nasty lines. Now, when I took this apart, I dropped the pistons down, the bore, turned the engine over, and I could see some nasty marks. And I thought, that's obviously where it's been nipping up. Now, what I found was, you either have wire clips on a piston, you have the gudgeon pin, you either have wire clips or circlips. Now, this one's got circlips. Now, if we look at this circlip here in my hand, it's all polished and distorted. Now, there's the other video I took, it would show the circlip still hanging in here. It wasn't located into its groove in the piston, and it's worked its way out. So that has worked its way out, rubbing on the cylinder bore. Circlip should be black both sides, like that one. But this is what you always want to make sure, when you put circlips in, you can actually hear them snap into the groove. If you're not sure, if it might be bad lighting, get a torch, just always make sure, because if they work out, you're going to be in trouble. We've got superficial scoring here on the piston, but this is due to all the debris that's been going through the crank, and it's taken the white metal, which we'll talk about in a moment. So we've had a problem with circlip. I'm now going to turn the barrel over, and you'll see the next part of this, the story. The story now starts to show itself for what's really going on. Now, this side here, this side, I looked at this, I couldn't believe it. You can see the skirt of the barrel, it's cast iron, right? This has been broken out. Now, I don't know, but it looks like this had a rebore, and possibly the boring bar was put through the barrel. You do each side, and it's possible that the cutter, when it got to the bottom, caught this skirt. You've got these 2 cutaways here in the skirt. We call this the skirt of the barrel. And what it's done, it's chipped it out. Now, I think they had to do something here, like to recover this barrel. They've actually bored it oversized and put a liner in. Okay, so this is a liner, so it's made it quite thin here, but that's not where it finishes the story. I'm just going to find what I found next. In the crankcase, there's plastic padding. Now I've used this plastic padding, I won't get it right, to form the shape. It would have been down here somewhere. And they built this back up with plastic padding. Because of the engine running in temperatures and probably because of the oil contamination, that's fallen out into the crankcase. So that was laying in the crankcase. There's another piece of that, which we've got here. So I found these two pieces of plastic padding in the crankcase. But not only that, I found bits of metal. And this is part of a bearing cage. Now, the cage, you'll see in the other video, you'll see that bearing still in the crankcase. The bearing itself in question is this bearing here. This is a main bearing that goes in the crankcase. And this one is on the timing side of the crankcase. We'll go to that in a moment. So, yeah, all the balls, they won't come out, but the race is broken up. So probably what's happened here, they started to seize up this bearing. It's got hot and the cage is broken. He said it was making an awful squealing noise, as well as locking up occasionally. So there's a lot going on here. So we not only have the valves that are damaged because the stellite isn't correct, we need to replace those. We have a barrel problem. So we've now had to, luckily, Norville have helped me out. I've got a good replacement second-hand barrel assembly, and I've got pistons for that, so we're lucky. We're going to have to take out the camshaft followers and change those over, but so that's got to be replaced. Big item, can be a lot of money. The crankshaft we haven't got here today. That's been boxed up. That's got to go off to RSM, and they're going to do a regrind. I send it off to people that I know I can trust, because with grinding the crankshaft, we've spoken about radius angles before, and the radius angle is most important. You don't take that away, because if you take that off and grind out to 90 degrees, because a lot of people don't want to dress the stone, because it's a grindstone that grinds the journal. We'll show you a crank a little bit later on. I can show you what I mean. So that will be sorted out. We have to have the crank grounds. That's going to go undersized quite a bit actually, because there's a lot of scoring. I think there'll be a video that you can see with this main video today. So new shells, crank redone. Has to be stripped as well, because you have to take the flywheel off the centre of the crank and then do the grinding and reassemble and realign it all. So that's where we are with that. Now, when we come to the bottom of the engine, because we've been talking about the barrel, what we found down the bottom, can't show the crank, but one of the conrods. Now, I've left the shells in here. This is what's happened before in engines we've had here, where the white metal has come off. It just exposed the bronze of the shell. See, well, the brass, sorry. So that white metal has disappeared. So where's it gone? It's gone into the crankshaft. So all the oil way in the crank was blocked. So no oil was getting to where it should be getting anyway. Various things going on here. When we took off the timing case cover, we found the intermediate gear. This is the gear that drives to the camshaft, chain drive and magneto. And this is the intermediate, goes to the crankshaft pinion gear. Now, there shouldn't be anywhere there. I'll put that on the bench. Like this, and you'll see that bush is completely collapsed. Shouldn't be any play there at all. We had something like this before with an engine where this had come loose in the crankcase. This is the other way this time. So that's got to be done. Now, the bottom of the engine, it does have a filter, strainer filter. There's a washer on the top with a circlip. So you can take these out periodically when you're doing oil change and wash them out. It's been slightly modified because this had been a wet sumper, and a lot of people do this. They put a bolt in the bottom with a magnet, and in here a lot of it's come off now, but this is all metal. This metal filings. This is from the engine, and there's all debris inside there. I think if I get my screwdriver, yeah, look, we got we've even got plastic padding here. It's gone through one of those windows. So there's a lot of debris in here. Also, what we've got to replace is the oil pump and also the oil pressure release valve. The idea of this is it maintains a certain pressure in the engine, and then the spring with the plunger will move and open up an oil weight and let the oil come back to the tank, drop the pressure down. Now, possibly, you see all these little shims here? I don't know what the rating would be, but you don't normally find 4 of those in the back of a pressure release valve. They normally run about 30 psi. They're not quite usually stamped up, but they were fit in the back. Just put them back into place. They're a bit oily because I haven't washed any of this out yet. And they literally just sit down inside there. And then, what I can't get out and I can't show you, I'll put them into that in there as a cup. Well, that is like the actual valve body itself, sorry, the plunger part of the valve. And the spring goes in there, and when this is tightened up, it puts preload on that spring. Now, what should happen is the oil pressure comes against this side, will push that plunger back, and the oil comes out of these holes on the side here. I can't actually do that because it won't move. Now that's another thing. You see, that's not working properly. When we stripped this down earlier, I tried to get an airline to blow it back, but it's so tight. It's got muck the other side. I don't know if you can see it as well. That's got behind the actual plunger. Also, oil pump. Now, when an engine has done this sort of damage, you don't mess about, you put a new pump in. Reason being, all that debris has gone through these pump gears. So you've got to make sure, if it's superficial damage, you just need to check this anyway, but I would say replace it. Another thing that you want to replace also is this sealing washer that goes between the pump and the timing case cover. Now if we take this apart quickly, I can show you where the gears are chipped, and that will reduce your pressure, and that will be probably resulting where the ball is not coming off the seat on the anti-wet sumping valve. It doesn't help. Right, I normally do this on paper. So what you have, you've got 2 sides to a pump, and what it does, it draws the oil and it's taken between the gears and pushed out the other side. Well, if I take all the screws out, just break it down a bit more. Okay, that's that side. We have a chamber. Now in here, if you can see in here, there's a lot of scoring. Well, the oil, that doesn't want to be scored at all. You have such a tight tolerance between the outside of the gear and the casing. And when the gears come together, it draws the oil in the middle. Now these teeth, if you look, it might be a job to see, but there's quite a lot of chipping on the outside edge. But they're not brilliant. And also you have wear in the body. A lot of the scoring is around here. So we're going to replace the pump, replace the pressure release valve. Sometimes when you've got a wet sumper, you can take these pumps apart, and I've done this, and you can clean up where you get some piece of rag. Okay. You can put this on a block and rub this and get rid of these score marks. It does help, because all this won't help oil pressure. You want to get the oil into the pump and push it through. You don't want all this scoring and wear. But yeah, the teeth aren't brilliant. See if I can just pick out one of these ones and show you a bit more. This is the other side. We just take a gear out. Here we go. But there's certainly, they're not brilliant. They're not brilliant at all. But this is something you always want to check. Oil pumps, make sure the gears are clean, because all that debris got to go through this pump all the time. It's circulating. So the customer's going to get, you know, basically it's going to be new shells, it's going to be barrels, pistons, and we're changing things like we've mentioned the pump and the pressure release valve. But this is important. We've got a new cam chain going in here and the dynamo chain. But you can see that here, the slider, the new ones, the commando type one, has like a pad here. So we replace that. But the next thing, we've got a K2F mag here, magneto. But it's not used as a magneto now, it's used as an electronic device. Now all it has now is a rotor in here, like a sensor. Now this is where you would have your cam ring and your points assembly. And we have an automatic advance and retard on a gear, on a bob weight assembly on this side. Now what's happened here, and I said this to him, you can't leave this, we've got excessive wear. Now this assembly, you normally have packing shims in here, but I've got some bearings and I can take this off and sort this out. But you can imagine if you had points in here, you would be opening and closing the points here. It's that bad. It's so much wear and tear. And this is still running, but it just goes to show they will keep going, but not good. So I think this is called Forspark. It's a company in Brighton that do a modification where, let's just say that the armature was giving you trouble, you didn't want to spend out on having it rewound, you could convert this over to electronic. They do dummy bodies, but you can use your old existing magneto. The pickups for your HT leads, you can take out your spring and the carbon pickup, and they will still stay in there, but we're not using those leads anymore because we have a wire from here. And we'll just show you quickly on the bike. So under this seat, we can now see, now this is a rotor. This is what we've just been showing you. We showed you the magneto. Well, this will go in place of the cam ring, and all it is this device here. This is just literally a pickup here, and we've got obviously a sensor.
Toward the camera, mate. Yep.
It has a sensor in there, so it's electronic ignition. So we have a wire that will come up from here. We've got a coil bank here, so it's 12 volt electrics now. So we've got a twin lead coil. So it does away with the HT leads that are in the magneto, but you can still, it still looks okay because you've got the leads and you can hide those leads. And this lead here, you won't really see these HT leads looking any different from the standard lead because you can just hang them out the frame and it goes to the plugs and it'll be fine. So that's what we got, and he wants to keep that still. We could have put it back to a good working mag, but he likes that upgrade. As you can see, it is quite an involved job when you take an engine out of one of these, and nothing's been cleaned up yet. Everything has to be pulled out of the way to lift the engine out. The reason is on the slimline featherbed frame, because it tapers in. If I was to lift this tank up a little bit, you might be able to see, it tapers in. And when he comes to get the head off, there's no room. So you have to take the whole engine out, which is quite a fiddle, especially on your own. So that's that really. Okay, what I'm going to show you now, we've been talking about top of the engine and the crank. We're going to talk about the crankcase. Now when we split the cases to take the crank out, we had to remove the bearings. They're out now and everything's washed out. That's another thing, is anything where there's been a major problem, you just need to clean everything. You need to clean it in a chemical cleaner. You need to put brake cleaner for it afterwards, and really use your airline, blow it all out. But the best way to drop these bearings out Now this, no, that's the wrong one. This one was in here. Okay. This one has a race, an open race bearing. This one here. Don't just drift them out, because people can do that, and it's not good because it will stretch these cases. The best way, you've got an oven, not your wife's oven really, but I put these cases in an oven, and I usually put it on maximum heat, put them in there for about 5 minutes. That way up, when the bearing's in there, that way up, when it gets to the right temperature, the bearing just drops out and you can hear it drop onto the bottom of the oven. So you put it on your tray in your oven, you just let it drop out. It only takes a few minutes really. Same with this one. You know, you just hear that noise out and back here and think, okay, it's dropped out. And that's what we're doing. When we come to put these back in, we'll warm these cases, we'll put a bearing in the fridge, get it nice and cold, we just drop it straight back in. So nice and easy. But so now the cases, get rid of all the gasket material and, you know, everything that could possibly be contaminated. See, sometimes if you have an engine apart, you look at a bearing, you think, oh, that's okay, you oil it up, and you leave it in situ, but it can get debris behind the bearing as well, can lay in here. This has got a bit of wear and tear here, it's more corrosion. I think it's had some repair work done, because if we look on this side, it looks like it's been repaired at some stage in its life. That looks like it's been built up with aluminium. It could have been one at the factory when they'd done the casting and it was being machined. It might have been something that went slightly wrong. Then it was repaired later. But yeah, so important to get any debris out of that crankcase. There was a bit of damage on here. We just flatten this off and clean this up. The seal will be okay and everything will be fine there now. This rub mark was due to the flywheel of the crankshaft, probably when the bearing collapsed. It was getting movement in the crankcase. It's just caught this here, but that's okay. But it's so important to get everything really, really clean. So we take out everything. We take out we have here a little window here, and this is all part of the breather assembly, a little disc in there that runs with a spring on the end of the camshaft. We take everything out. We leave the main bushes in place, and when you put these cases in the oven, they won't drop out with the heat that you need to require to drop those bearings out. These will come out quite quickly, just a little bit of heat. You can do it with a blow lamp really, but it's easy if you've got an oven. Just put these cases together now. So that's now waiting for the crank to come back, then we can build up the bottom end. So really that's it really. So there's a major amount of work that in the beginning probably looked like, oh okay, you know, there might be a bit of a problem with the top end, but no, it is major. Bottom end as well. So getting back to anyone that's got this early type valve, any valve, occasionally, you know, check it, wash that filter out, make sure yours clean and regularly changed. There's nothing wrong with these anti-wet sumping valves as long as the pump is good and can manage pulling the ball off the seat. And don't go playing around with the pressure release valve, putting more shims in. If you've got any query with the valve, put a new one in it. So yeah, I mean, for an easy check, just taking that off, you know, and just seeing a return, you could have saved all this really. Except for, we know it had a circlip come out. So that's where we are with that one. So it's a little bit sorry at the moment, but it just takes a long time to get these jobs together again, because there's a lot of parts that you need, a lot of you know, sort of phone calls, and it takes a while, you know, because these are old bikes, and trying to find the good stuff and get it all done properly, it's not a quick fix. So yeah, keep you posted on that one. What have we got next to look at in here? My A65 Thunderbolt everyday bike. It is now back in the workshop, and it's got the engine out of the frame. Now you're going to say, why do you do that? Good reason. These suffered, the A65, A50s, the conrods, it wasn't uncommon for the conrods to stretch. They become slightly oval. And what I was finding, I could hear a bit of a noise, a bit of a knock. And that's not uncommon on these engines. They're not as quiet as the A10. But because I use this and I'm going to hang on to it, it would have gone on. It was fine, but it's just a bit of a knock. And I thought, do you know what? In the winter, I'd take it apart. I knew it could really do with a rebore. So I have sent the barrels off, well, the barrel assembly off to SRM because there's no one locally now that can help me out. And they know these engines and they're good at what they do. So send it to someone that is recommended, someone that is used to doing this sort of equipment, not doing a one-off. So it's going to come back with plus 40 pistons, nicely bored out, and I've got from Kidderminster Motorcycles all the parts of the motorcycle that I need coming. We're replacing the conrods, and I'll show you on here. So I stripped the engine down, I've taken the crank out, and I left one conrod on the journal here for you to look at. Now if we look at this other journal here, it's good. It's all standard, and even the timing side bush, it's all standard. It's been well looked after. It's done a few miles now. But if I look at this right side rod and I try and get right position, you will see that that rocks from side to side. Now, this sort of movement's okay, because it will float a little bit like this. That's quite a bit actually, but if you look at this, when I get hold of this, it's actually rocking. And that's a telltale sign that this has worn oval. I might just show you on here. We'll quickly do a measurement here, but just see if we can. It's hard to pick it up sometimes, especially when you do it as a camera. But we're getting a reading here of 46.72. If we do it this way on, we got 78, 42.78. Oh, it's gone out to 85. But if I just show you measurement, that's tight there. Might be easier this way. This way, it won't go in. If I put it and make it fit this way, I'll do it this way and show you back the other way. That's tight here. This movement, you probably can hear that. It's very slack. But that, so what's happening is, the shells aren't in here now, but it's wobbling like this. Because these do stretch to a certain extent. You can imagine the engine running, you will get stretched. Now, this is an A65 rod, and this one here is out of the Atlas. The cap is made of steel, much stronger, less chance of that stretching. The rod has got the strength in it up here, because you've got the extension of the rod itself. There's a lot of metal there, well, a lot of aluminium there. But these are quite often a problem, and new rods will sort it out. New rods, new shells, that'd be fine. So rebore, new rods, new shells, and I'll put it back together. We'll have a nice quiet engine. But if you listen to a lot of these unit construction engines, they do have a bit of a knock sometimes. It won't probably get any worse, because the oil will get in there. You'll notice when you start out from cold, it might be all right for the first few seconds because you've got a lot of oil in the crankcase, and then once it starts to return and it gets warmer, the oil becomes less around the journals, and you probably will hear it, especially when you tweak the throttle. So it's a good one, and it's worth, if you're doing anything, if you've got one down this far, measure measure in there, put your cap back together, nip it up and put a vernier in there and get some readings off of it. It's hard to show on camera, but yeah, there is movement, and so that's not good. So what else have we got here you might find interesting? The gearbox on these, mentioned before, it's a cassette gearbox. That means the whole box, literally, you unbolt it around the flange here. This side, you have your high gear, but once you've taken your clutch off, the whole lot will come out. You can do this in situ. Now, this box, I built this up and it was all good. But what I have replaced is on the selector cam here, you got these selector forks. Now these forks have an inbuilt roller bearing. Now these bearings, they get quite worn on the shaft, the little stub shaft. So I've replaced these because there's quite a lot. I'll try and find this one, trying to get the movement for you to see, but because it's all oily still. But you can actually move these from side to side.
Can't see that, mate. Oh yeah.
And it does rock as well. So it just means when you're going through the gears, these ones are nice and tight. You can get a bit of a sloppy gear change. This would be more positive. So it has to run through this gate here when you do the selection of gears. So that is better. So really, yeah, it's not a bad job putting back together. There's a lot of parts. A lot of people think, oh, you know, but if you take it apart and put it in boxes and keep it all separate, it'll be fine. We've done all the head before, that's fine. We don't need to do any work there because that's all good underneath. We've put new valves in there and new guides, and you can see she's running quite good. So, a bit of an update on the Scott. The Scott has been here a very long time. I did send the carb away to Kevin up in Scotland because I wasn't sure whether it was right or not. We tried to fire it up. Well, I fired it up and it ran, but it didn't keep running properly. He's had a look at the carb and we've gone for a much bigger main jet now. We've just got a little bit of weep of coolant, which we can just sort out. I think it's a case of nipping those studs down. But when we've got it run up and it's warm, then it's cooled down. Hopefully that'll be all okay. So everything now is connected up, and next week we'll get this fired up, and if it runs correctly, it's then time to put the sidecar chassis back on. As we go to clean these threads up here, slightly damaged, we can just chase those threads down. Set this all up, get it all set up, correct adjustments, so we've got the towing properly done, then we can put the body back on. And hopefully that will be it, and we can hopefully take it out the road, and maybe Alex will sit in the sidecar and we'll film that as well. So that would be good to get this one out, because these jobs, when they hang around, they almost like get rooted in here, and it's frustrating because it's time and it's space, and I want to move on to doing something else. So yeah, that's it. That's all the workshop stuff at the moment, and yeah, we're just waiting for parts really on the Atlas. So thank you for watching, and catch you next time. Thank you.